Yeah, I messed up, but we are live. I
We
think
are live. Hello, everyone. Constantine, are we staying live?
we are staying live. Let's stay live. Let me fix this really quick for
Okay.
Instagram.
Well, Constantine is fixing stuff, and I think welcome back to Sunday with Constantine from Unleash Thyself and Ashley from Big Miracle Energy. I think today's topic is why do we value the valueless or valuing the valueless, which you thought was kind of funny, and I agree it's funny. But it kind of,
Yeah,
for me, was prompted. I guess I can give a backstory of why I brought this up today while you're doing what you're doing, Constantine. But essentially, my partner Patrick and I are really in this space of clearing space, and because we are just preparing for what comes next in our journey, and we really are leaning into that next step of our journey is kind of being nomadic, and just really what I call like going on the road with Jesus, road tripping with Jesus, and both figuratively, whatever, both reality and just like through our connection. When I say reality, it's because I've got my little bobblehead Jesus that we're going to take with on the road with us. Um, but yeah, so in that process, we're clearing house, we're clearing the things that we are attached to that keep us rooted. And I've done this multiple times. Like right after my divorce, I pretty much took everything from the house and stored it in a storage locker for like 4 years and paid astronomical amounts of money and really never used the junk. And so ever since then, I've kind of every time I've moved, which I think was a total of 13 times in a matter of like 5 years, PS, I would get rid of more and more stuff and try to pare it down and pare it down and pare it down. And so we don't have a ton of stuff in comparison, I think, to most people that would be in their, fourth decade of life, but we still have a fair amount of things. So, about a month ago, I really just felt guided, not guided, I just felt inspired. We'll say I felt inspired to sell my vehicle. And I did. And in the process of selling my vehicle, I realized how many stories were tied to that vehicle and like how I hadn't not had a vehicle since I was 15 years old. And how through, I moved out of my home at the age of 16. And then um when I got divorced, it's always been like my safe haven. Like the things of importance to me, I always kept in my car because I never knew if I was going to have that same place to lie my head the next night. It just was always my ability to feel safe and then also run. I was a runner. Anytime things got tough, I would run, meaning peace out, I'm taking time, and I go jump in my car and go for a drive or whatever. So there were some major stories to break through in regards to that. And I did a whole video on it. So I won't go super in depth, but I brought it up today because now I'm selling more and more stuff on Poshmark. So if anybody's not familiar with Poshmark, like it's super fun. I'm like, oh my gosh, if we weren't becoming nomads, I think like I would want to do this. It's like a treasure hunt and then you like sell your treasures and it's so much fun. But it's also very like time consuming if it's not your full-time job. But I stuck these overalls on there. I'll show you because the lady hasn't got them yet. And as I'm paring down, you have to be like realistic. Like items kind of need to be more neutral when you're traveling all over so they kind of go together. So having a bright orange pair of denim short overalls is probably not the most versatile piece of clothing to have. And I love them. I love them so much. But then Patrick said to me, well, when's the last time you wore them? I was like, last year. And he's like, then do you really love them that much? And I was like, yes, I do. So I threw them on Poshmark for a number that was more than what they had cost because I was like, okay, I'm going to throw a number that I feel good with. And I ended up going down like $15 from that number and they sold. And I just felt this like sadness within. I was like, oh my gosh, they're gone. And Patrick's like, well, why did you negotiate? And I was like, because I wanted someone else to like experience this. And like, I share this detail as much as it feels like it doesn't matter. It matters to show the valuing of the valueless. These are just a random pair of orange denim shorts that literally in 6 months I'm not going to remember about, right? Unless like Constantine's like, hey, remember those orange shorts? Or, like something sparks that memory. But I truly had this heaviness. And I truly believe that the awareness I have today saved me from my day being ruined yesterday, because I feel like I was on the verge of the ability to not acknowledge the sadness because it seems stupid, seem irrelevant, and instead project it out and all of a sudden be like, oh, Patrick, you made me mad or you made me sad, when really it was always about this connection I had, valuing the valueless. Does that make like, are you following along with why I wanted to bring
Yep,
this up today,
yep,
Constantine?
yep. Absolutely.
I kind of went off for a bit, so I hope you
Yeah,
got
no,
everything.
that's the one question that came up for me there, and I'm sure this is going to take us in a different direction, but we'll come back to what you just said. Is what has value then? If everything is valueless, or most things are valueless.
Yeah. I mean, I think that truly the only thing that is of actual value is unconditional love, which is not a tangible thing that you see, but instead a remembrance of what you are.
Mm.
So, because like when you think of when you value something, you go out of your way for it. You do things for it. You expend emotion, energy, blah blah blah, all these things for things you see of value, right? That's go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was gonna. Something came up for me here as you said. This is so beautiful because at the end of the day, the reason we place value on things, in my opinion, is because of the stories that we made up in our life. Now, again, some of these stories were made up to protect us. Like you gave the example of how your car or your vehicle was your essentially your safe haven, your way to escape, your way to feel like you can go places, and now you got rid of it, and it's like, oh shit, that was based on a story that I was telling myself and then repeating, and then essentially built it to such a stance that you didn't even realize it was a story. And that's what I see life as well. It's like we have all these stories that likely didn't even start as your own story, started as someone else's story. You took it on, you applied your own spin on it, like any habit, you kept using it,
Mm-hmm.
and now it becomes part of you and you don't even question it.
Mm-hmm.
And what got me thinking the last few days as well, or the last few weeks, right? It's like what power do we hold if we can actually look back at our stories and change them? Because we can. But most of us don't, because of fear, I believe, or because of not knowing. I look at my life for the first almost 40 years and I never even thought about questioning my stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the process you're going through right now, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like it's like, okay, well, what value did I place on this? Why did I place value on it? What's the story behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Because the story is not that's a nice pair of denim shorts, right? I mean, that's that's part of it, but there's a bigger story. It's like what feeling do they give you? Is there safety? Is there a fear that goes behind it? Like that's what brings up what comes up for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's not, it's what story or what shame and guilt have I projected onto that pair of shorts that I think they somehow carry my happiness backpack and help me avoid looking at my shame and guilt. And I think the cool thing is, Constantine, we don't always have to know the exact story behind things. Because what I found is like I've done so much releasing of stories, like some of the larger stories over and over again, that despite that feeling that way yesterday, I didn't need to dig super deep and super understand it. I just need to hand it over to spirit, because I had kind of already worked through or brought awareness to a lot of the rooted things that would have been connected to that, if that makes sense. And so to me, it's not about changing the story per se. It's about handing the story over and releasing it so that something doesn't carry a story at all. Because when something carries a story, it carries weight, period, whether it's positive or negative. And so it's really about releasing all stories, which if you look at the Buddhist religion, would be releasing yourself from all things, all attachment. And I'm not saying that we have to go to that extreme of like not owning anything and not partaking in worldly pleasures, but it's about the weight you place on them. And the weight, I think, is always a story, right? Even positive or negative, that is the weight that you place on it. So it's instead about enjoying when you have them, right? Like I enjoyed that time, but then the moment they're gone, it's like you can take it or leave it. That statement, I can take it or leave it, whatever it is, because it doesn't hold weight either way for me.
Yeah, no, I definitely see where you're coming from, and I would agree that you don't always need to know the story to either let it go or change it. And what came up as you're talking about that is like the beautiful matrix that's being built on, story upon story upon story. So you have layers to go through, or you have layers that you get to go through. And let's say in this case you released that one, and it's likely one layer, and there's more layers below it that are supporting whatever story you've built up to. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely a curious take, because not a curious, but a very beautiful and interesting take, because I do believe a lot of things in life, as you become aware of them, it's much easier to make a choice that will be in your highest interest. So with some things like stories, maybe becoming aware that you have a story might be enough to release it, as opposed to needing to know what the story was. And that's an interesting thought, because in my case, I've been able to have more success with the stories I'm able to actually find in my life, see them for what they are, and then let them go. Right? Like we're talking about the fear of cold water from before. And for me, that one I couldn't let go until I understood what the story was about. So I'm curious to see, there's definitely, obviously no one knows the answer, but I'm sure there's the truth is somewhere there in the middle.
But I think truly all, like you don't, there's a possibility that in fact you don't know the root of that actual story. As much as you believe you do, you know what you believe the root, like you're saying, I know that was the root of this story. But what if all of a sudden next week someone reads your Akashic records and says 3 lifetimes ago you drowned in ice cold water? That was really the root of your story. And then all of a sudden your mind's like, oh, that makes even more sense. So
let me ask something there, because it's beautiful you actually went there. It's so funny. So I was at the spa last weekend, right? And it's a warm day, but the water is still frigid. But this time, so instead of being 0 degrees outside and I go in like 40-degree water, it's 100 degrees outside and I go in 40-degree water, right? So the shift was a bit bigger. And I've been at the spa, I guess, 3 times in the last, month and a half. And I've noticed that, I'm fine going in the water. There's no fear coming up. But last week, usually I don't submerge my head in the water, but sometimes I do. But last week I did. And as I did, in the cold water, right? It's probably 40 degrees. It was really cold. Literally, I jolted up in fear. And I was like, what's going on? Like, literally, this fear overwhelmed me. And then as I got out of the water, because I was scrambling, I was like, what's going on? I thought I went through the story. And as I was meditating on it, exactly what you just said came up. A vision of a past life, perhaps, or whatever it might be, maybe an imagination of mine, of being at sea, and then there were some pirates or whatever, and then was thrown overboard, and I drowned in cold water. But the interesting thing was, the fear was not that I was dying. The fear was that I was leaving behind a partner and children at the time, in whatever it was. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. The fear was like everything that was left behind, because I was gone now, or I was about to go. And what I realized in the moment, and this goes to our story here, I didn't even know we're going to go there, but see how the stories are built on, it's not just one story. That was part of it. And that allowed me to now be able to go and do the cold plunge a lot more efficiently, but there are still parts that I hadn't uncovered yet. And I was like, that's interesting. I haven't been able to sit with it more since then. I haven't given myself time for that. but there's definitely more to the story than I originally thought. And that kind of goes to your point. It's like we don't even know the story most of the time, and sometimes we think we know it, but really we only know a part of it.
Mm.
But I feel like, truly, I feel like you gotta start with a part of it. You release that part, then the next part gets to reveal. You release that part, then it gets to reveal.
Mm.
Because, like, if you think about my first fear, right? I was never even getting close to putting my head in the water because I was so miserable, and the first fear was holding me back.
Mm.
I got to release that story, and now I'm more comfortable taking the next steps. And now a new story gets revealed,
Mm.
or at least a new story gets to play out, rather, maybe because it didn't get fully revealed yet.
Mhm.
So it's very. I love that you brought up the point. It reminds me of like how many things in life are really. And as we, why personal development or whatever you want to call it, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Mm.
Like the more you get to understand yourself, the more you realize you you have to understand, or you get to understand. You get to forgive. You get to release.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I brought that example up, I guess, as to show how stories are never ending, and that in fact I see it as part of like the ego smoke and mirrors. It's like the chasing of the carrot, right? It's like as soon as you think you've conquered one thing, the ego will come up with a new story to make you unconquer it, when really that's taking two effects and pretending one is a cause when they're both effects, and one effect can't an effect can't create an effect. Only cause can create effect. So that's where it's like bringing it back to the mind and understanding how unimportant the story is, and how instead the story is a distraction from the actual release of allowing it to occur, because the story is a projection. It's you projecting out the control you have within the mind of releasing it. So then the blame is external, right? So it's like my fear of water is not my own doing, but instead it's the doing of this memory I have that occurred X, Y, and Z, which relinquishes the control back into the ego's hands. And it allows the ego to continue to have us chase the carrot. And yeah, like when you're living in the ego illusion, of course it has to mirror what what truth looks like and feels like in moments. Otherwise we would just like a long time ago have been like, no, ego. So those are the moments of where you feel that you had a breakthrough, but a breakthrough until the next carrot. So it's just like success, it's just like everything else set up in the illusion, versus just like completely relinquishing it and being like, okay, um this is this is me projecting something out from within my mind, period. It's a projection. It's something that was set up for the opportunity of forgiveness, which is for me to realize it actually didn't occur, and that it doesn't, the power is back within. It's really about me projecting out my own shame and guilt. So this is just how I view it. I would then say, like with the water thing, Constantine, that that your mind has set up your script to have water be a lot of your forgiveness opportunities, and that you continue to actually not forgive because you actually are making it more real each time. Even though you're able to push through it, you've made it more real. You've turned it into an actual obstacle when it never was. It was just like a projection of your own mind. And the way to rid yourself of it forever is to see it as it's not even, it just isn't.
I
You
mean,
know.
it's fine. That sounds simple and easy, and it goes back to the question we were discussing 2 weeks ago. What if it could be easy? And yeah, I mean, I can't argue that. I'm like, hey, we'll see when I get there.
Yeah.
I don't yet see it like that, but I know that there is an easier way. There
Yeah.
has to be an easier way.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, it's like the never ending onion. And I think that's what I realized in like the personal development and like shadow work and different things like that. I was like, man, this is like never ending. And if now people are bringing up past lives too, like, oh my god, I could have lived thousands of lifetimes, so like I've got like this is a never ending story. Then this story is just like a constant chasing of the carrot. And I loved it. I mean, man, I thrive in analyzing the ego. Like I can analyze an ego like no tomorrow, because that's where I was living, was in the ego. And so I find it easier, and I don't know. It's just like this feeling of it just is. But don't get me wrong, I get sucked in all the time of trying to create a story of what does this mean, or what does that mean, or where did this come from, or why did this come, because that's like what I lived in for so long. Um but yeah, it really took a moment for me to be like, there has to be another way. Like this can't be a never ending story. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of, that all got brought up for me when you were sharing. I was like, yeah,
Well, I mean, a never-ending story. That's interesting, though. I mean,
which was one of my favorite movies growing up. P.S.
yeah.
With the big dog, he rides
I
on the
don't think
big
I
dog.
know it. I know. I don't
Oh
think I know
yeah.
the movie. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were just saying, right? The more you unpack certain things, the more it shows up, right? I used to say something like this, like when I would become passionate about a subject. Even now, I mean, it goes like that, right? You were like, oh my god, I can't wait to dive deeper into this, and the more you learn, the more you realize you know very little, and that's how it feels like on this journey as well, right? Because we, or our minds or our egos, try to not tend to overcomplicate things, right? And it's like, oh, so I must find this. If this is a path and it feels too easy, then it's too easy. We need to find something harder
Mm-hmm.
to justify the effort that we put in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, right now in Lighthouse, we're covering, this is our second go around, and we joke all the time about Lighthouse could literally just, this could be its only focus 24/7, is the I know mind. So the exercises we're doing is like paying attention to the days where you act as if you know, or the days where you don't know, but you want to know. So that's what we're constantly doing, is like we're either in this state of I know, or we're in this state of I don't know but I want to know. So then you're seeking the answers through different whatever, and it's literally in everything you do. And I was talking about, I had this like new realization about curiosity, and that there might be more than one form of curiosity. So children, even though they seem like this clean, beautiful slate, they came here because they're just as spiritually poor as we are. It's just they have like amnesia stronger than we do. In the moment, they haven't picked up all the latest worldly, you know, constructs that are occurring. So they seem more pure and more, perfect and more in touch with our innate state. So that's where like curiosity comes in. But the issue is the curiosity a child actually uses is more ego driven, because it's curiosity because they don't know and they want to know. Right. So that's ego driven versus like pure curiosity, like true. I believe like eternal love, Jesus curiosity is like, I'm truly curious and I don't have any expectations or wants of gain in this curiosity. Like there's nothing. It's just like I'm curious. There's no and, there's no but, there's no reason. It's just I'm curious. Does that make sense? Like I had kind of had that like epiphany the other day when we were doing the I know mind, is like
Mhm.
ego curiosity is because you don't know but you want to know. True curiosity is just like it just is. I'm just curious.
Yeah, but how often is that through curiosity? If it is like, okay, I'm just curious, disguised because there is a story that's
Oh,
running
right.
around, and it's
Yeah.
like it's controlling the situation, right? So it's not really true curiosity either. So
Yes.
I don't think we'll ever know in this life,
I plan to.
perhaps.
I mean, because I really think it's the place where you get to be essentially the closest you can be to enlightened while appearing in a body. I think it's where Jesus was, it's where Buddha was, it was where Mother Teresa were. It's like that is the state where you can experience true curiosity and true wonderment, because it's not like of this illusion, meaning it's not of gain or anything, it's just of like pure oneness, and pure oneness doesn't need to know. It just is like open, if that makes sense, which that is like true curiosity. So I plan to get there. That's my goal in this lifetime.
Wow, that's a beautiful goal.
But it's like you have to continue to be aware of these stories, and it's not about like unpacking these stories, it's about being aware of how these stories are attempting to distract you. Like, oh, okay, I'm projecting out on my orange overalls, and it has nothing to do with my overalls, has nothing to do with that, and it has everything to do with how I decided that they filled me in some way, which they cannot. They're valueless. I placed value on the valueless.
So let's talk relationships then, because everything in life is a relationship, right? Because you have a relationship with those pants,
Yeah.
or with those shorts, right, or the overalls, and then we have relationship with everything. I mean, even me and my computer here. If you were to, let's say,
That's kind of creepy, but yeah.
but I mean, think about it, right? Like if the
No,
computer,
it's
like
true.
let's take your computer, right? If it all of a sudden shuts off
Yeah.
in the middle of the stream, you're gonna be pissed off. It's like, what's going on, right? So there is a relationship that we just don't. I mean, that's what I see. It's a
Well,
relationship.
the reason why I said it's creepy is because it like puts in my mind of where meta is taking this world. Like people are literally going to have relationships with their computer, like
Well, in
married.
that sense, yeah, with AI for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so if everything is relationship, like let's take relationship with other beings, and I say beings because I'm thinking of my dogs here. I'm thinking of the people in my life.
Mhm.
Is this something that you would consider valueless as well, technically on the surface, or is there value behind all relationships, or is it again based on the stories? Because I look at the relationships I've had in life, and there's of course a lot of them were driven by stories that weren't mine or aren't mine.
So to me, the value of everything is for forgiveness. So it's not, because when it comes to like eternal love and truth, there is no level of hierarchy. And that's the issue with like illusionary value, is like we have this hierarchy within the value, right? Like, oh, if I said to you, Constantine, can I have your car for $2 or your pen for $2? You'd be like, hell no, you can't have my car for $2. It's worth way more than that. The value is way more than that, right? So when we're talking like eternal love, value of truth is just like the purpose, I guess you could say, um, which is that of forgiveness. And like your brother, your animals around you are all projections of the mind. So it's all Christ, a mirror of Christ, right? Because you are Christ, the mind is Christ. That, and then everything is just a mirror of that. And that's where I think in the Bible, gosh, people, anybody tuning in, like I am not like, I don't have the Bible memorized, but I think it talks about like everything is made in the eyes of Christ, which people then interpret that God made this world. And that's not how I interpret. How I interpret is like we are of God, the mind that created this place. So it's in the eyes of Christ, if that makes sense. Like it's through that vision that this is being projected. So it's a projection. It's not an actual made thing. So everything is technically a part of the mind, which is a part of God, if that makes sense. So it's like, again, when we bring it back to the dream, I think this is usually the easiest way to look at it, is like if you dreamt last night, Constantine, that you had a Ferrari and a Toyota, the value is the same because they were both in Constantine's mind, right? So it's as much as you value Constantine, both those things, right? Even the shitty car versus the great car, the value is equalized when you realized it was just a projection from one thing, one mind, Constantine's mind. Does that make more sense in regards to that?
I mean, it goes very deep, right? So it does make sense. I'm not going to say it doesn't, because it does. It opens up a lot of other avenues for conversation here. But let's take the dream one, right? Because that's something that became very interesting for me lately, because I didn't used to dream.
Mhm.
Or at least I couldn't remember, but now it's pretty much every day and quite a lot, and I remember quite a bit of it, which is really powerful. And you're right about that, because in my dreams, I mean, there's a variety of things that happen, and then when you wake up and realize it was a dream, there might be a bit of disappointment that it's not actually, let's call it, real life. But then there's no value placed on it.
Mm.
And it's funny because sometimes I may have a dream that was so vivid and so powerful that I keep thinking back on
It's
it,
like
like,
reading a good book.
yeah, like the entire day, right? Until it kind of fades away. So that means
But
I place some value on whatever was presented in that state
can
by
I
my mind.
invite you into something?
Sure.
So, our sleeping dreams, right? I do air quotes, sleeping dreams are just as real as our wake dreams, I believe. As in the sense of real, because they're all illusions. So they're all equally unreal, actually. But so my invitation to you is that your dreams have the same purpose as your waking time does, meaning the opportunity for forgiveness. So if you wake up the next morning and you feel very happy about what happened in that dream, or that you made a good choice or whatever, it's just another like wink. It's another realization that you are remembering at a deeper level, because it's coming through now in your, when the time you think you're not in control, right? Which you're never in control the way you think you are. But it's, do you see what I'm saying? So they hold just as much purpose as your waking time, because it's all forgiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even, but wait, even deeper, if you wake up in the morning and you feel sad that your dream last night isn't what today is, oh my gosh, it's another forgiveness opportunity to forgive that that's not what you were experiencing, believe you're experiencing in this moment, right? Everything is always an opportunity for forgiveness, meaning it never really happened anyway. The release of it. It's always just a projection of your mind. So, okay, why, like, your mind projected last night that you had $1 million and your business was doing well, and you wake up today and your mind has projected that your business isn't doing good and you're $1 million in debt. Well, guess what? They're both equally just as unreal.
And you know what came up as you said? That is funny, actually. I'm curious to see your take. Which means that you can choose whichever one of those you want to experience in life and make it happen. Because if they're both illusions, they both can be. So then choose the one you want to make. That's what manifestation is and visualization, right? Because now you go back to like, well, if I really like that, and it's an illusion anyway, like the what I'm experiencing right now, why not make that a reality?
Yeah. So the mind is powerful. There is what many people believe to be manifestation. I know that it appears to be real in moments, but then it's also appears to be unreal for many people just as much. So it questions the validity of either. And I'm a firm believer that the scripts are already written. So it's kind of just like your main goal is to just pay attention to your perception and let the rest align. Like one of my favorite statements from A Course in Miracles is like, we're not here, it's not your mission to change the world. Your job is to change your perception of the world. We're not here to change the world. We're here to change our perception of the world. So to me, that is like one of the most powerful, liberating, freeing statements I've ever heard in my entire life, because I think I've spent my entire life trying to manipulate the world. manipulate what I see, right? Whether it's the people, whether it's my bank account, whether it's my business, whether it's my animals. I mean, like, think of it. I think when I was training my dog and it wouldn't kept pulling the leash and I'm pulling back and it's pulling and I'm pulling and it's pulling it. And like, what a beautiful representation of what's always going on in the mind, right? Like at the simplest form, we're constantly trying to make everything, everyone, every animal, everything do exactly what we want it to do. But the problem is we don't know what will actually bring us happiness. So what the fuck do we think we're doing trying to manipulate it? Because again, I go back to it. Like, and I would love to have a conversation with someone who truly does not believe this is true. If we knew what brought us happiness, we would all be happy. If we truly knew, if we truly knew, we would all be happy. But that's not the case. Period. So why not trust your guides, Constantine? Why not trust your Holy Spirit, Ashley? Why not trust Jesus? Why not trust those that do know what makes you happy? But the reason why is because the ego has taught you what makes you happy, right? The ego has infiltrated you with social media and all this other shit that says, Constantine, these brand new Nike runners that all the Olympians are going to wear, I bring this up because they're all sold out. We read an article today, are going to bring you happiness. So guess what? Every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the world bought a pair and now they're sold out. And now people are going to pay $150 extra because the ego told them that will bring them happiness. But it's constant. It's the carrot. So then you get the shoes, you wear them 2 days and you realize you don't like the way they feel or they just lose their newness. And then it's on to the next thing. This supermodel is going to bring you happiness. Watching this movie is going to bring you happiness. Getting 100 followers on Instagram is going to bring you happiness. Don't you, Constantine, you and I have played that game where it's like you start out with 0 followers and you're like, okay, I got to get to 100. Then you get to 100, you're just like, okay, 200. And then you're like, okay, 300. Like, it's just a never ending rat race. I have a friend that her videos get millions of views. And here I am like, getting, hundreds of views. And she's like, yeah, I got to up my game. I got to do this. I got to do that. I was like, if I just got 1 million, like I would be fine. But that's not true if you're putting any weight on that.
Until you get there, right? And then the
Right.
carrot moves.
That's the carrot. So that if we go back to the stories that we place on the reasons why we don't do things is the same exact carrot of the stories of the reasons why we do things. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just one feels cooler because it's like a negative conquering. And the other one just feels like that's just how life is because that's how the infrastructure has been set up of like you're chasing happiness. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's literally the same side of one coin. Or no, 2 different sides of the same coin. Sorry. Do you see what I'm saying though? It's identical. It's just one has been glorified as like a personal development, spiritual development world. So it's really cool to go through and be a detective there. The other one is just how you operate every day.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of went off on a tangent. Sorry about that.
I mean, it's not really a tangent, right? I mean, it's about the topic today, the value placed on things that have no value.
Mm-hmm.
In truth, right? Because another way I guess we can look at this is like fast forward 10 years from now, fast forward 100, a million years, how important is what you are craving, wanting, or doing right now.
Exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the butterfly effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder of that, right? Because if what's the implication of something you do? So if it's all about forgiveness, like you said, and you've mentioned it a few times, and I agree with that, right? Forgiving and forgiving yourself,
Mm-hmm.
then that makes sense, right? Because the butterfly effect of that, or the ripple effect of that, can be eternal.
Well, if again, let's go back to the dream, and it's Constantine's dream last night, and we go in and we do brain surgery in your mind, in your brain that had the dream or whatever, and we change one little thing, everything in that dream is going to change because it actually was just a projection of your one mind. Right? So we all have access. We all are that one mind. So we're all accessing that. So when we actually do deep level forgiveness at the level of the mind, right? Not at the ego level, but up at the level of the mind, it literally shifts the entire mind for everyone. That's why I have the video of, do people actually change or our perception of them? Because it's all about the mind. Now, when we think of the butterfly effect at the level of the illusion, you can't create unlike yourself. So the world is very much, I think, because it's projected out from the one mind, created to kind of represent some of the things that occur within the mind, right? Like the same patterns. So if that happens at the level of the mind, no wonder it happens at the level of the illusion, where something small can impact the greater, because it's literally what can happen at the larger level, or at the more metaphysical level, I guess.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the whole thing with other people, right, is, are they changing, or is your perception changing? I would take it inwards first. It's like, do we as individuals ever change, or is it just our perception of ourselves that changes? Because then I'm looking at my life, right? Like, have I, on this path, I mean, have I really changed? Or have I changed the way I perceive myself and my stories, which allowed then a different perception to be broadcasted externally?
What I've always been saying, do you actually have control over your external, or is it just your perception? See, now you're like actually seeing how that shows up in your own life of like, shit, yeah. Like maybe none of the external ever changed. It was how I viewed it, which can have impact on the external.
Which actually brings something interesting. Sorry to cut you off, because this is actually big. I have a question for you, which explains why some people so okay, I'll go to my partner here for a second. I wasn't the best partner in the first few years of our relationship, right? I had my own challenges, let's say, right? And she had a perception of me based on that, right? And I have made what I call big changes in the way I perceive myself, the way I am, in the last few years.
Yeah.
And in my mind, in my field, I'm like, oh well, I am doing all these things much better than before. But from her perspective, it still hasn't shifted as much. She still sees some of the old things, even though they're not there anymore, because it's her perception that hasn't changed yet, despite me projecting, let's say, a different perception, because she's in a spot where she doesn't necessarily can or whatever. She's not willing to perceive it differently because of the hurt that was done in the past, perhaps, or the stories that the mind made up. So yeah, now I get. So
well, you will always find what you were seeking. So again, if we go back to like how we operate at a metaphysical level versus the ego illusion, let's think of the internet, which was created, right? Like I think everything represents the larger. So the internet, if I want to believe the sky is red, if I go Google on the internet, I will find enough backing that says the sky is actually red, right? Or if I want to say it's blue, I will have enough backing on the internet. So you will always find what you are seeking.
Try the simple one. The earth is flat versus the
okay,
it's not.
Yeah. I just choose random shit.
I know,
like,
it's funny because you know what? Speaking of that, for whatever reason, when I was browsing some stuff, what was it, around the holidays, I stumbled upon some reels with flat, with backing, flat earthers, and I got sucked in because I'm like, man, these guys are really going in and trying to prove their point, and then it makes your mind wonder what if, and then of course the way the algorithm are, well, you watch that for 2 minutes, I'm going to give you more of that. I went down this rabbit hole, and I'm like, well, I can see how misinformation gets spread, because at the end of the day, we don't know what's real and what's not, right? Let's be honest. Like, it could be either way.
It's
right?
all just as unreal. So a flat Earth is just as capable as a round Earth. It just depends on what the collective mind is viewing in the moment.
Yeah, so it's interesting how easily our opinions can be manipulated
Well, it's
by.
not even manipulated. It's just like how your perception can be impacted if you allow it to become external again, right? That's again another, it's like the beginning where we talked about the stories are just a distraction. That is just a distraction from the actual work to be done here, which is forgiveness. Right? It's just everything is a distraction. And I'm not saying like don't, partake in worldly activities or behaviors, but it's the weight. It's do you allow it to become a distraction, or do you always see it for what it is, which is an opportunity for forgiveness? Right? The ego wants to keep you distracted, keep you in the rat race. So it will keep you wanting to make everything complicated, everything to have a major story, everything to be a massive, overcoming, all of that. And even like with the lightning thing, I mean, I'm not going to go super deep into that. We can talk about it different, but Patrick and I, either our tent or ourselves was struck by lightning last week. And I found myself going back into needing a story, wanting it to be something special and magical when really all it was just what it was. And maybe within the illusion, it was something, right? Maybe it was like an energy download or this or that. But the journey I am intentionally being on is a journey that's like pulling away from that, pulling away from the need to have specialness and have weight on it. It's cool to hear about it, but when I place weight on it is when I know I'm being sucked back into the illusion and sucked back in those magical stories.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, but it's a
That's,
feat,
that's a
right?
discussion for maybe next time, because I have some
Yeah.
opinions on that as well. But no, it was a beautiful discussion. I realized we're pretty much at time here, and
Yeah. I think it's
food for
a
thought
discussion we
for
can have
anyone
forever.
listening. Anyway, Ashley, for those listening, thank you for listening. I know it was a very deep conversation. I know it got me pondering a few things, reflecting on. But for those interested in more of what Ashley and I have to share, we both have our own channels. You can find me at Unleash Thyself, the podcast, and on YouTube or on any podcast platforms. Of course, you can find Ashley at Big Miracle Energy, and I'll let her talk a bit more about what she does here right now.
Yeah.
I will let you go.
Yeah, you can find me Big Miracle Energy YouTube, Big Miracle Energy Patreon, which if you like these conversations, Constantin and I do them every Sunday that we are not doing them with the Big Miracle Energy Patreon, which we go live the third Sunday of the month, which I apologize. It did not work out well. Constantine has to help me with Restream again, but last weekend we were supposed to be live and we were not live. But usually we are. And then we usually are not live on the first Sunday of the month, where it's just us with Patreon digging deep. We had a great conversation last weekend, even though it wasn't live. I did record it. Maybe we'll figure that out. So
Yeah,
come
yeah,
find us.
lots of beautiful conversations happening. And I invite anyone listening, if this sparks anything, it's not about who has the right answer. You get to go inwards yourself as opposed to externally, and maybe find your own answers. And hopefully this sparked some curiosity to go digging into your own stories and what has value and what doesn't have value truly in your life.
Yes, 100%.
Ashley, always a
So much
pleasure.
love, everyone.